This morning, I have the honor of introducing Jay Adelson, Cranbrook Kingswood Class of 1988. Jay grew up in Southfield, where he began his schooling. He recalls that his second grade teacher didn't know what to make of him. Fortunately, his third grade teacher did. She saw something in Jay that she believed would not be nurtured in his current educational setting. Jay's parents, teachers in Detroit public schools, agreed that Jay would benefit from an environment that would allow him to explore and broaden his interests. They believed that environment could be found at Cranbrook, and it turned out to be the right choice. Jay entered Brookside in the 4th grade and remembers being excited to find that the school had computers. Brookside is also where Jay was first introduced to photography and film by visual arts instructor Doug Cooper, whose influence on him proved to be significant. Jay recalls with pride when, at the age of 9, a film entitled Visible Man, produced with classmate Brad Hampton, who is here today, was submitted to the Michigan Student Film Festival. Jay had found his art, filmmaking, an art that he continued to view over the years as a likely career choice. Yet, Jay's interest in computers also remained strong, and during his middle school years, that interest was taking root as computers entered people's homes for the first time. When friends were engaged in other activities, he was engaged with computers. For Jay, computers were becoming another form of expression for him. By the 9th grade, he had mastered the computer completely. Jay looks back fondly on his high school years. When he wasn't in the classroom, Jay might be found working at the school's radio station, WCKS, just walking around campus, or as Jay puts it, doing computer stuff, which included competing on the Cranbrook's computer team. He spent so much time on campus that many thought he was a boarder. The computer lab in Gordon Science was Jay's commons room. Rich Lamb, who was an important teacher and mentor for Jay, spoke his language. Jay believes that he learned much more here than could be found in a textbook, including how to express himself and how to handle adversity. He valued the opportunity to have real conversations with the adults here and recognized that managing problems of any type was easier when students could talk about them. Jay credits Cranbrook Kingswood with providing him with resiliency training. Jay entered Boston University in the fall of 1988 as a computer science major, but after 3 weeks into the program, Jay learned that he would have to take a course in discrete mathematics. Jay never saw math as one of his strengths and switched his major to his other area of interest, film. However, Jay found a loophole in BU's registration system that allowed him to take computer science courses in night school without having to take the prerequisite mathematics courses required in the regular program. He graduated from Boston University with a major in filmmaking and a concentration in computer science. After college, Jay moved to California to pursue a career in the film industry, taking an unpaid internship in sound engineering with Skywalker Sound, part of Lucasfilm. However, the need for a steady paycheck, coupled with his continued interest in the evolving world of technology, led Jay to further his career in the telecommunications field, first with Netcom and then with Digital Equipment Corporation, where he helped to build one of the early internet service providers in the United States, the Palo Alto Internet Exchange. It's hard to imagine a world without the internet as we know it, but in the early 90s, there were thousands of networks of information controlled by individual companies like AOL and Verizon without the infrastructure for them to communicate with one another. Jay describes it as having airplanes without airports. Someone had to build those airports, the hubs that would allow global businesses and individual internet users fast and reliable access to all of that information. Jay was willing to take on that challenge. He didn't think that it would take as long or cost as much money as it did, but in 1998, he co-founded Equinix, the first company to provide a data center platform as a neutral place where competing networks could connect and share data on an international scale. Jay served as Chief Technology Officer, responsible for the invention, design, and construction of the company's data centers and internet exchange points. Cybersecurity became a growing concern after 9/11, and the government wanted to be certain that the internet posed no threat. In 2003, as part of an industry panel, Jay was asked to testify before the United States House Homeland Security Subcommittee on emerging threats, cybersecurity, and science and technology. The urgency was evident when he was given a weekend to write a 15-page testimony on the private sector's role in keeping America's cyberspace secure. Jay gives credit to his CK English teachers for providing him with the writing skills to get that paper done. Today, Equinix has data centers across 5 continents and handles more than 70% of the world's internet traffic, making it the most powerful internet infrastructure company in the world. Jay has started over a dozen tech companies, including Dig, an early social news website, Revision 3, an internet television network, Simple Geo, an interface for location data, Osmatic, a monitoring tool to improve the effectiveness of development and operations teams, and most recently, Center Electric, an early-stage venture capital firm specializing in infrastructure and the Internet of Things. In 2008, 3 years after he left Equinix, Jay was named one of the top 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. During his successful 30-year career as an internet entrepreneur, Jay always enjoyed the mentoring part of his work, and as a result, now finds himself considering teaching as a potential career move. For the time being, Jay is stepping back from the fast-paced tech life and is restoring vintage pinball machines with his son, something his son learned to do on the internet that his dad helped to create. Jay is here today with his mother Elaine, his sister Anne, Cranbrook Kingswood Class of '86, his son Ben, and nephew Ezra. Jay's wife Brenda and daughters Lisa and Rowan are watching this ceremony live streamed from their home in California. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jay Adelson.
Thank you, Claudia, for the kind introduction and for all your service. Mrs. Seibert, faculty, friends, parents, grandparents, and fellow graduates, many of my former teachers and role models are here, and I hope you all know how much it means to me to join you today and the impact that you've had on my life. I'm honored and I'm grateful. By the way, Charlie Shaw's out there somewhere. Remember that extension I needed on that writing assignment in 1988? Well, here it is, and I hope I get some partial credit. So first, let me start by saying congratulations, class of 2018. You did it. We're all so proud of you. I have 3 children, 2 in high school and 1 in college, so I have some front row experience and know how challenging this path has been. You really need to remember this moment. It really is incredible. Usually in a commencement speech, you'd hear about tips for success, tackling adversity, how to discover the what, why, and who you are at the core. I'm going to skip all that today, not because it's not valuable, but let me be blunt. The work you've completed here has already set you up. And you know, if you really need that kind of advice, there'll be plenty of people who will be delighted to offer you pointers on how to become, or at least feel, successful. Instead, today I want to talk to you about 2 important concepts that not enough people think through as they go out into the world: power and integrity. I know you thought you were done with lectures, just one more. Okay, power. Consider what you've just accomplished. It's incredible. Years of classes, grades, transcripts, and GPAs, complex projects and papers. It's all part of what I loosely refer to as a human-made system, or an artificial construct. High school itself is a construct, we humans have created to obtain and optimize a result that's related to education and preparation. And generally speaking, it's one that benefits everyone involved. Out there in the world, there are good constructs and there are bad constructs everywhere you look. The truth is, we're all immersed in these systems every day. We get used to them and choose which ones to pay attention to and which ones require a little less focus. Another example of such constructs, and one that I'm sure you're all familiar with, are sports. When you're playing a sport, say basketball, you're performing within a system of rules that have been developed over many years. Let me just throw down, sports were not my bag. And the summer before junior year here at Cranbrook, the school's interscholastic sport requirement, quite frankly, terrified me. Let's just say that I most assuredly was not and am not an athlete. That said, I had a few extracurricular activities I did enjoy. One was the computer club, which I was convinced to join by my friend John Bardsley, or Bards. As part of the club's activities, Rich Lamb, our computer teacher and sponsor, would take us to computer meets at other schools. With Rich driving the van and Bards and I and the other nerds in the back, it was like a scene from Stranger Things. So then one afternoon, Bards and I were chatting about it over lunch, and it occurred to us, wait a minute, we're competing against other schools, right? I mean, by anyone's standards, these meets were interscholastic. So we approached Rich and asked for his support to petition to consider the computer club as an interscholastic sport. Coach Rich thought it was hysterical, so he signed on. We even got the entire football team to sign it. No one thought we would succeed. But what did we have to lose? I mean, Bards and I had never been in front of the athletic department director before. He didn't know us, but we figured we'd give it a try. And we presented that our case that the computer club was, in fact, the varsity computer team. This guy didn't know what to think. He looked at us dumbfounded. Remember, this is 1988. To most people, computers were still a mystery. And since we weren't athletes, he had never met us before, but he couldn't fault our logic. And he decided to grant our request. So we had fulfilled our sports requirement. We even got a photo in the sports section of the yearbook. So why am I telling you this? What Bards and I did is we took a look at a system, a construct, that we viewed as crazy and decided to rethink it. It was like a switch turned on in my brain, and I realized that with any of these constructs, within reason, it's entirely up to you if you want to conform to their rules. In fact, systems exist because most people don't approach their world creatively. They just conform. Conformity is what happens when you don't feel you can change your environment. But once you realize you have this ability, this power to approach life's challenges differently, things have a way of working out for you. And this power comes in many forms. Here's another example. A couple of years after I successfully lettered in varsity computing, I found myself at Bosch University, where I learned that if you had an interest that spanned two separate divisions of the school, in my case film and computer science, you were kind of stuck. Back then, as you'll see, these divisions or colleges within the university often make you choose a path and fulfill a set of requirements for that path, making interdisciplinary studies difficult. Another artificial construct. So I logged into the course catalog. The loophole I found in the registration system was that if I took computer courses at night, which were registered as adult education, I could take and get credit for all the computer science courses I wanted without actually being registered as a computer science student and having to take math. So during the day, I could take my film courses, and both would count for credit. So in the end, I found a way to be the first film student with a computer science concentration. And when I presented this to my advisor, he said to me something I'll never forget. I guess doorways like this are there for a reason, so that people like you can step through them. My friends, the willingness to find such doors and step through them is part of how power works. After I graduated from college and I started to work for companies with tall corporate ladders, I realized that this was an artificial construct as well. Why not start my own companies? No one told me I couldn't do it. They would just stare at me dumbfounded like the head of the Cranbrook Athletic Department. Another doorway to step through. Look, I've had quite a journey, and I won't bore you with all the details. I've started 14 companies, some successful, many failures. Early in my career, despite my own battle with anxiety and self-doubt, my ability to find and walk through open doors, even when conventional wisdom suggested they didn't even exist, propelled me into these leadership roles. So what is power really? We typically associate power with strength. We associate power with the ability to control our environment. We think of power as winning. What I'm telling you today is that this is not the origin of power. Rather, power comes from perspective. Power is the ability to reframe your view, to not accept confining constructs for what others believe they are, and to introduce and seize alternatives. All this said, when it comes to seizing your power, as it were, it's easy to follow the wrong path. What keeps you from abusing it, becoming a tyrant, a criminal, a sexist? We often hear about the relationship between power and responsibility. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. With great power comes great responsibility, and so on. History teaches us these things, but this notion of responsibility to what? To whom? I would argue this responsibility we speak of is to truth and ultimately to integrity. Okay, integrity. Forgive me if I get a little preachy here and touch on some rough stuff, but after all, while power might be your gift, it's integrity that will inform your life choices. It is the key to steering the ship in the right direction. C.S. Lewis said, "Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching." Makes sense to me. But still, let's unpack the traditional dictionary definition. Integrity. Now, number one, the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. In all my years of building and operating corporations, hiring and firing people, designing and launching products, one thing has been made clear to me. There is never a business situation where a lack of honesty or transparency works. Sure, maybe in the short run, but if you're aiming high, you're playing a long game. Just look at the recent downfalls in corporate America or Wall Street, and you'll find there is one common thread. When integrity is compromised, failure ensues. Conversely, I've been able to attract great teams and had some great success because I always strive to operate with transparency and trust. Okay, back to the definition. Strong moral principles and moral uprightness. We all know what this means. It's the opposite of narcissism and ego. It's the opposite of winning at the expense of others. Our role models aren't unprincipled narcissists. They're moral leaders, or at least they should be. Here's a simple test. If you make a decision, would you be comfortable if everyone knows you made it? Know that when you make a decision in private without transparency, a decision that you feel you have to hide, it will desensitize you to its impact because you won't have to face others. And this, my friends, is where you begin to erode. It's where the lack of personal integrity becomes normalized, acceptable, standard operating procedure. It's where your power heads into the weeds. And know this too, when others near you support or even allow this normalization, it reflects on you. I can't stress enough the importance of who you surround yourself with going forward in life. When we surround ourselves with people who lack integrity, who support bad decisions, it creates a vicious cycle of normalization. It creates a cycle of affirmation. One of the recent examples we've seen of breaking such a cycle is the rapid rise of the Me2 and Times Up movements. Many of us have asked ourselves, how did society accommodate such horrific behavior of men over such a long time and let it continue to this very day? These movements began and became possible because of courageous people who have rejected that desensitization or normalization of bad or even criminal behavior. Previous generations had so much overexposure to this bad behavior from childhood to adulthood that to them it became normalized, or at least not taking action became normalized. Your generation, you don't feel that way. You must never feel that way. If something appears to be insane, stupid, a flawed construct, that's because it is. I heard Melba Patillo Beals on the radio the other day. She's a member of the Little Rock Nine African-American high school students who, in 1957, were the first to register for entry to a newly desegregated high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. Despite extreme danger to their lives and being prevented from entering the school by the governor, the Arkansas National Guard, and countless mobs, they continued day after day to try and enter the school. They forced a national discourse. And then finally, after a ruling from a federal judge, President Eisenhower ordered 1,200 members of the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division and the U.S. National Guard to escort these 9 students into the school. This all without Twitter, hashtags, or social media. Anyway, Ms. Beals said that if she ever was at a table where someone said something racist or made a Jewish joke, she would get up and leave. Simple. Essentially, she makes zero compromises where integrity is concerned in regard to the people she surrounds herself with. Zero tolerance for bad behavior. Zero tolerance for racism. So when one of you sees this bad behavior, a lack of integrity, sexism, racism, anything like this, get up and leave the table. This is how you break the cycle and avoid the normalization of bad behavior. This is how you back up your power with integrity. All right, back to the definition. The state of being whole and undivided. On Valentine's Day this year, we saw another massacre, this time in Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School. 17 people were shot dead. And then again, sadly, before I even finished writing this speech, at Santa Fe High School outside of Houston, Texas, another 10 killed. Out of these tragedies, we've been witnessing the incredible power and integrity of a group of students who, when unified, when whole and undivided, changed the discourse of the nation. They started the Never Again movement. And as I speak to you, they're forcing state governments, the federal government, and even the president to pay attention. They are students exactly like you, and they are choosing to act, to commit themselves to breaking a construct. Most of all, their integrity, their unity, gave them new power, greater power than any politician or even a president can wield. Now more than ever, we see the outcome of power without integrity. And indeed, it's easy and tempting to take the bully's path to wealth, success, and comfort. But your integrity, or lack thereof, will be your epitaph, your legacy. Life can be harder sometimes when you prioritize integrity, but I propose to all of you here today, as you launch your undoubtedly powerful and meaningful lives, that your power will be amplified by a factor of 1,000 if you maintain it. 30 years ago, as I prepared to leave here, the Cold War was ending. The threat of nuclear annihilation, which had plagued the world for nearly 3 decades since the Cuban Missile Crisis, seemed like it was on a path towards resolution. Environmentalism seemed on the rise and headed towards a better outcome. The world was globalizing, and at the time, it was largely considered a positive trend regardless of your politics. 2018 brings with it a very different context, and while you may have some distraction over trivial matters, your class is facing very real issues, and I'm going to be honest, we, the previous generation, took our situation for granted, and we left you with a world that's a mess. Look around. The Cold War started again with a new vigor. For the first time in decades, the real and present threat of nuclear attack from nation-state or terrorism is on our minds. Our climate's in crisis. We live in a world where the danger and obscenity of guns being in the wrong hands continues unfettered. Even the concept of democracy is under siege. When you examine these issues, ask yourself, do decisions or statements made by powerful people hold up to the test of integrity? Does backroom dealing, science denial, false facts, or lying reflect the integrity we need to move forward? When I was asked to talk to you today, what went through my mind over and over again was that if there ever was a class of graduates that can have an impact on this rapidly changing world, it's yours. And I beg you, do better than we did. Don't take anything for granted. And take action where you need to. Bring your power to the table and amplify it with integrity. That's winning. That's what will make the world truly great. Let me close with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who at the time was speaking about desegregation, but I feel these words remain relevant for almost all the greatest challenges we face today. May I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, and dedicated leadership, leaders of sound integrity, leaders not in love with publicity, but in love with justice, leaders not in love with money, but in love with humanity, leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. Now, graduates, take your gifts, your power, and your integrity, and go change the world. Thank you.